Welcome to the podcast of Educators Without Borders. Today we have guest Jumana Haj Ahmad. She is from Middle East, UNICEF Middle East. So let us welcome her to the podcast. She will be talking on her experience, especially children and their education. Jumana, please welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Please share your experience. I know you have been in the field for last 2 decades, different offices of UNICEF, and you were serving children and for helping for their education. Could you share with us?
Sure. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me today. My experience and UNICEF's work in humanitarian settings is a priority, obviously, with education being at the front line of our humanitarian response. And as you know, wars, conflict, epidemics, natural disasters spare no children. In situations of emergencies, children lose their loved ones, their homes. They have no access to water, education, sanitation, and including education in our humanitarian response is a priority. And through my experience, and mainly in my work in Palestine, in Sudan, that has been at the forefront of our humanitarian response.
Great to hear that. And also you are Palestinian originally,
Yes.
and you have been working in other part of the world. So how do you feel? Maybe you will have more empathy to the other people who are suffering. Could you explain, how was your work, maybe comparing with the work in African region and also Middle East?
Thank you, Abbas. Through our work, and maybe if you allow me to speak also about UNICEF's work globally, in responding to education rights for children in humanitarian settings. While my work particularly has been mainly in Palestine and Sudan, but there are great examples of the work that UNICEF is doing in many other countries. In our response, we've been prioritizing education. Why? Because of the learning crisis. As you know, before COVID, around 50% of children living in low-income countries, and particularly 10-year-old children, could not read a sentence and understand it. And after COVID, the number went up to 70%. And this really is a learning crisis. And that's why we've been prioritizing it as an organization in our response. Also, when children lose their access to education, they're not only losing their access to learning, they are losing their sense of normalcy, they're losing safety, they're losing protection. And that's why we've been using also education as an entry point for integrated services that are being provided to children in humanitarian settings.
That's great to hear those things. And also this is a new era, we have new technologies.
Mm-hmm.
How you are using technologies, how much it is incorporated or integrated to your area of education development?
Sure. So in our response in humanitarian settings, and particularly with the education and learning component, we've been focusing on providing access to quality and equitable learning opportunities with a focus on the most disadvantaged groups. And what does that mean? It means offering children and adolescents with learning spaces that can be in different formats. It can be in the format of a physical learning space where children come together and learn to catch up, to also continue their learning when there is a war around them or a natural disaster. At the same time, we've been using technology and innovation to provide learning spaces. And if you allow me, for example, one of our flagship projects is the Learning Passports project. The Learning Passports project uses technology to provide access to learning platforms for children in situations of crisis. It is an offline and online and free platform that allows children and teachers to access learning resources. It is adaptable and it is easily used. It is currently being used in 30 countries, and 19 more are in the process of working on it and developing it.
That's great.
Yeah, and if I may add that this platform is being used by governments as a national management learning system, and some of them use it to complement existing digital platforms.
Wonderful. So this is an application. How, and also I would like to know, maybe we'll ask you, how, because our podcast will be listened by the normal people more, and NGOs. So normally UNICEF is an high-end organization for these, and it's part of intergovernmental actions. So how the local people, the laymen or the NGOs can connect you, how normally it's happen, and how the passport can be available to all.
Sure. So usually UNICEF implements its programs on the ground with the government, but also with NGOs.
Great.
So these are our implementing partners. And the program itself is designed in collaboration with them, but also with the children themselves, to make sure that it really responds to the priorities and needs of children. We're always keen to make sure that a space is always created for children to engage and to participate in the design of these programs. So different approaches are used to spread the knowledge about these programs. It can be through the ministry, it can be through the partners, the NGOs, it can be through digital media, but also we've been a lot using and working with community mobilizers. And these are people from the community whom we train, collaborate with, to identify children who have dropped out, to bring them and to share with them knowledge about these platforms, but also to offer knowledge about other alternative non-formal education platforms that the children can join.
So now in some places, there are dropout children, most of the case, some of them don't have access, and some of them are dropping out. What you do for attracting them?
So I'll give you an example. For example, in Iraq, after COVID, we trained a number of community mobilizers to go into the communities and identify those children that have dropped out. They identified around 40,000 children and young people who have dropped out, and worked with them to bring them back to school or to non-formal education settings. And this is what we call addressing barriers to demand to education. So we address why aren't they going back to school, and we try to respond to their priorities, their situation, and their needs through different solutions.
Great. Thank you joining with us, especially sharing the initiatives of UNICEF, and hope we'll have more opportunities in future, especially to work with the Educators Without Borders and UNICEF in future.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having us here, and thanks for the great work that Educators Without Borders